Thank you, Pat. I'm going to set a little context because I can't not do it. And that is that that November 4th, we elected a president who asked us to turn a page. And I think we've done it, and nobody knows what the new page reads like. But I think this is very timely that Dr. Smith, Gloria, and Mary Starke Harper are two names that are before us today as we look at this. These are two of the great leaders in addressing the issues of minority health, and it just seems a right time. So I wanted to say that before we start.
Thank you.
Yeah. Since it's our hope, Gloria, that the audience here learn some lessons about your life story, your narrative, and how it might guide them, I thought we could start at the beginning and talk about maybe some of the people in your early life, the persons that shaped you, shaped your values, the lessons they taught you. If you would share that with us.
I'll try, and I'm sure it'll get easier as we go along. I'd like to first thank you for the opportunity to share with you. It is a real honor. I can grab a stage sometimes and say things, but I've rarely been invited to have this amount of time to really talk about myself. I consider myself a post-depression child. I was born in 1934, and times were tough. So some of what we're looking at today looks a little familiar to me. My mother is probably had the most influence on me as a child, like most of you have parents who were quite influential. My mother was a teenager who wanted to be a professional. She always wanted to be a nurse. But she was lured to Chicago by her sisters who had moved there from Louisiana. And she thought that she was coming to visit one of them so that she could go to school, and she was married off. My mother always feels that she was enslaved by marriage. And so she was not a very happy wife, but she was a wonderful mother who kept her head in books, and she was always interested in the strong female characters in each book. And for some reason, nursing to her represented strength and courage and service to the community. She wanted to be a nurse, but she was not attracted by white uniforms and caps. She was more interested in Lillian Wall-like people, those who were out helping people in the communities, working in the settlement houses. And when I think back on this, my guess is that she could relate to these nurses because they had more relevance for her life and our life in first Chicago and then Detroit. So, but I didn't want to be a nurse. I mean, that was not my idea of what I would do. I landed in nursing quite by accident, and it was luck for me because I would have been a lousy scientist. Although I had the ability, I just would have never been able to focus and have the kind of attention that would, on looking at molecules and microbes or whatever. But my idea was that I would be a great scientist, I'd be a botanist or a biochemist or something like that. Never dreamed that I would land in a profession where I would be working with people. And I came to nursing because there was money available. I was 16 years old, I had graduated from high school, and that seemed the easiest way to get an education for a person from our circumstance. So I applied. I was too young. They would not accept me in a diploma program because the laws at that time required that you be 17 and a half so that you would be 21 by the time you wrote your state boards and had been involved in clinical care. You couldn't be involved in clinical care before, I don't remember whether it was 19 or whatever. So I ended up going to Wayne because by the time I got to clinical, I would be old enough to have that experience. But I was very, very lucky because the people at the College of Nursing were quite like the women that my mother admired. They were intellectuals, they were strong, they were courageous, and they were doing things for people. In the interim, so it was my mother, then a couple of teachers in elementary school, one who told my mother, and teachers were not afraid to go in communities then, and although we lived in a pretty rough section of town, teachers came to visit. We all had to take the Stanford Binet, and my teacher showed up at my house to tell my mother that my brother, who was a year younger, and I had the ability to be whoever and whatever we wanted, and that we should be encouraged in school to excel. And she asked my mother whether or not we owned books, whether she had started a library for us. And when my mother told us she had not, she said that she should, and gave us our first books that we owned. But we had already been accustomed to going to the library. So it was a couple of teachers, my mother, and then the faculty at the College of Nursing. Now, they were all women. These were all women.
I did notice.
Yes. Not that there weren't some men around, but they were all women, yeah.
And strong women.
Mm-hmm.
And then you went into public health, which kind of seems to flow from everything you've said right now.
Well, that was kind of interesting, too, because I had my public health nursing experience. The Wayne's program was a 4.5-year program with only one summer off. And so when I was in my last part of my sophomore year, I had, out of sequence, my visiting nurse experience. And they liked me a lot. They thought I was pretty bright at the VNA. And they decided I was going to work for them. So I never had a choice. So from that point on, they owned me, more or less. B. Gewick, who was a supervisor, she offered me work in the summer so I could work there one day a week. And then when I graduated, she said, "Of course you're coming to work for us."